Alright guys, once again I am filming in the middle of a heat wave and I am absolutely not turning off my air conditioner. So if it comes on in the middle of this, I'm sorry. I'm just thankful to have my air conditioner and I'm gonna use it. So I'm here with an ARC review that's technically a little bit late. By this point the book has come out, but I've just been in a reading slump. It's been really hard for me to read, and so I've been struggling honestly, but I did it, I got it. I'm not sure this is the kind of book that's gonna help me with my reading slump, but let's get into it. So the book that I am reviewing today is the sophomore novel of an author named Lacie Waldon. If that sounds slightly familiar, I talked about her debut novel last year that was called The Layover. And this was a book about an enemies to lovers romance between a flight attendant and a airline pilot who there had been a misunderstanding, there was some baggage, but they got stuck together in Belize and you know, things happened. And I didn't get an arc of that or anything, I just read it when it came out. And I distinctly remember saying in, I think maybe my wrap up or something else, like, you know, that was actually a really, really good book. And I'm sad that just where I was in my reading cycle and the arcs that I did have to do reviews of, whatever, I never did a full review of it because it deserved better. So when Lacie Waldon had a new book coming out, I was like, oh my goodness, like I'm definitely going to review this one and I'm going to make up for not reviewing The Layover essentially. So her debut novel was The Layover and her sophomore novel this year is called From the Jump. From the Jump is the story of Liv or Olivia and Dice or Lucas. So Olivia's nickname is Liv, Lucas's last name is Dice. They go by Liv and Dice, but it can get very confusing because there's 4 names flying around the entire novel about who you are referring to. Liv and Dice are 2 members of a 5-member friend group. The other folks are Mac, who goes on to become a male model, Phoebe, and Simone, who is an Instagram influencer. I cannot remember for the life of me what Phoebe does for work. It's fine. Anyway, these 5 people met in college and they formed a friendship from the jump in orientation from the start. They have been inseparable ever since. Phoebe and Mac actually dated for about 5 or 6 years. They broke up, but their friend group was so important to them that they stuck it out. They became friends again. That will be one of the side plot lines in this. Anyway, Liv, unlike the other 4 of them, does not have as much money. She is what the synopsis describes as a chronic yes woman. She's currently working for a graphic design firm where her inability to say no to her employers has basically meant that she gets all the really bad, awful celery brands or bone broth brands that no one really wants to work on, but you know, she reads all the books, right? She reads Husband Hunter, she reads How to Succeed, and she's just like committed to, you know, living the life, do her hair, do her makeup, you know, wear the blazer, do the work, and move forward that way. But every year the friend group takes some kind of vacation together, and Liv has never gone in what is now the 11 years they have been friends. And this year they're going to South Africa, and Liv says she can't go. Her friends of 11 years somehow don't realize that this entire time she's been saying she can't come because she can't afford the international travel that her friends are going on, which is weird because later on in the novel you find out that Simone bought clothes essentially for Liv under the guise of like, oh, this was given to me as a gift and I don't really want it, and it was in Liv's size, not Simone. So like they knew, but no one's ever questioned her on it. Anyway, I'm doing my review in my synopsis, I'm sorry, but like they would know, right? They would know. Much faster synopsis, sorry. So Liv, realizing that her entire life is not making her happy, is talking to a friend from work named Elena, and she goes, you know what, I'm tired of saying yes, I'm gonna say no. So saying no to her boss gets her put on kind of like vacation, employer enforced vacation, and she and Elena get drunk and she decides to go join her friends in South Africa. On the South Africa trip, there are some rivalities some past baggage between all of the friends that slowly start to be revealed, including the fact that Dice and Liv have a thing for each other, maybe. Dice definitely does. Olivia is slower to realize, so that's evolving. That was surprisingly a shorter part of the novel than I'm making it seem. That's honestly like just the introduction to get the ball rolling. So in a way it's longer and also shorter than it should be, because weird things start to happen when their plane lands. So Olivia comes home, she has left Elena in charge of her apartment. Elena somehow managed to let someone rob Liv's entire apartment. So Liv, after being only one bed troped with Dice over all of the South Africa vacation, ends up having to move in with Dice, who has a guest room now, because her entire apartment has been cleaned out, and they stole all of her money. If that sounds abrupt, let me tell you, the entire setup for that is abrupt. And I don't want to go too much farther into the story because then it will really start to get into spoilers. But like, there are some plot conveniences throughout this novel like that contribute to making it feel really, really choppy and weird. I'm sorry, I did a really bad job doing the synopsis first and then my review, but I have such a rough time with this book because on the surface, it sounds like a very similar setup to The Layover in the sense that there's a trope. In this case, it's not enemies to lovers, it's friends to lovers, which are in a way similar, right? You have two people who have some kind of background or baggage coming to realize that they in fact, want to be in a romantic relationship with each other. So I'd seen this been done successfully in The Layover. And there's always, it seems like with Lacie's books, a little bit of armchair travel in them. So was Belize and now South Africa, which was fantastic. But The Layover spent much more time in Belize than this book does in South Africa. So if you are looking for more of that, you are not going to get nearly as much of that as you expect. And there's also less chemistry. There's less romance because this clunky plot just keeps clunking forward. I mean, it's a romance novel. We know Liv and Dice are going to get together. I'm not expecting a grand reveal of that, but this book treats that as such a fait accompli that it just didn't really seem to build that up even that much. I really wish, too, that I could talk about the ending and the part of the novel that happens after South Africa, which again is about 50 to 60% of the book, I would say. So it is the major chunk of the book. And of course, a chunk of the beginning also doesn't happen in South Africa. So I would really love to tell you about it because it's just the things that also lead to, like, the climax of it. It's just so much plot convenience. It just struck me as almost a first draft, like that someday like an editor was going to come back around and say, okay, so we want these things to happen, but we need them to flow in a more natural way, and no one ever did that. And like, I understand I read an arc, but normally the things that change between like arcs and the final physical copies are not the huge major structural changes that would have to happen to make this, to me, work. Now I want to say that I've looked at other reviews of this, like on Goodreads, for example, or the Storygraph, and this is holding down around 4 stars. People are saying, it's like more generally a 3-star book, like it's very light, fluffy, enjoyable, but forgettable or not like their best book of the year. So no one's out there in general. I'm sure there are people that really enjoyed this book, but while no one is out there in general being like, this is a book that will change our times, I also would just like to say that maybe I'm just missing something here, because there are people who really, really went on and enjoyed it. I just wasn't necessarily one of them. I didn't hate it, but I just did not like how this novel just kept having one ridiculous thing happen after another. And not in the way that like a fun romance novel would, where like you're like, oh my goodness, that's absurd. It was just like, in order to get Liv and Dice together, this has to happen. And so we're gonna shove this event in there to make that happen. And then in order to have Liv and Dice have a fight, this has to happen, and we're gonna shove that in there. And then one of their friends is gonna act completely out of character, and then that will never matter again. And you're just like, okay. Take my level of emotion going into this review as I loved the layover. I wanted From the Jump to be good. It wasn't good, and I had a high bar set after the layover, which again is not like my favoriteest book ever that I've ever read, but I really, really enjoyed it. And there was just something about From the Jump for me that didn't work. It just felt really clunky, almost in a way like From the Jump is a debut novel and the layover is a sophomore novel. Like the layover is much of the same bare bones plot from the Jump, but just done more cleanly. And that's weird to me, because I know that Lacie Waldon can write a good book. The good book exists. And so if you've made it this far in this review and you want a little bit of armchair travel in your romance, go read the layover. Go read the layover. You will enjoy that. It may not blow you away, but you'll probably enjoy it. Maybe you still want to give it a try, see what I'm talking about, see if that relates to you. Get it from your local library, whether an e or physical copy. Get a free book and then come back and tell me if you agree or not. I'm gonna try to have next week's arc out on time. This is a really weird time in my life. Some stuff is happening in the professional world. It happened after I read this book though, so that is not to blame for this review. It's just kind of happening. And I'm just gonna try to stick to my schedules and Michaela and I's schedules, and hopefully find a book soon that will break me out of this morass of not great books that I've been stuck in. So I look forward to telling you more about the good books in my future. If you've already read this book and you had a different opinion, I don't know, let me know. This is only my personal opinion. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.